"Don't move, your grace," said the woman in the doorway, "or she'll sting you, and then we'll both be sorry, chiefly her." The Duke of Quarrowe had not been given an order in his own study in 10 years. He looked down. A single honeybee was walking slowly across the open page of his rent ledger, in no apparent hurry, pausing now and then as though the arithmetic troubled her. The woman crossed the room, laid a sheet of blotting paper flat, encouraged the bee onto it with one bare finger, and carried her out of the window into the September light. Then she came back, wiped her hands on a canvas apron that had once been white, and considered him. "You've a swarm in the chimney of your east wing," she said. "It's been there 4 summers. That's honey coming through the plaster in the yellow bedroom, and I shouldn't wonder if you've been calling it damp." "We have," said Clement. "Well, it isn't." She was perhaps 27, sunburnt across the nose in a way no lady would have permitted, with strong hands and a plait coming down out of a straw hat, and she stood in his study exactly as she would have stood in a barn. Her name, his steward had told him a fortnight ago, was Jemima Crale, and her father had kept the Quarrowe hives before her, and Mr. Nash had engaged her to put the apiary back in order, because the estate's beeswax candles had once been famous in 3 counties, and now the estate could not light its own chapel. Clement had signed the paper without reading it. He signed most things without reading them. It was one of the several ways in which he had stopped being present in his own life. "Mr. Nash will settle your terms," he said. "Mr. Nash has settled them. I came up to tell you about the chimney." She was already at the door. "And to say the black cloth on the hall mirrors wants taking down. It's rotted through. It'll come away in strips in front of company and shame somebody." She was gone before he could decide whether he had been insulted. The cloth had hung there 10 years. So had everything else. At Quarrowe the mirrors were covered, and the shutters in the west rooms were closed, and every clock in the house stood at 20 minutes past 4, which was the hour at which the Duchess of Quarrowe had died of a fever in the yellow bedroom, while her husband was in London on a matter of business he could no longer, by any effort, remember. He had been 3 days on the road home. He had arrived at 10:30 at night, and been met at the door by a footman who could not say the words, and he had gone up the stairs 2 at a time and been too late by 52 hours, and after that he had simply the clocks and given orders that the house was to be quiet. The servants had obeyed him so thoroughly that they'd trained themselves out of laughing. He had noticed it once, 4 or 5 years in, and had been unable to think of any way to give it back to them. His sister came in October, as she came every October, with a list. "There is a Miss Rowe at Ilbury," said Lady Sedgley, over the cold half of a dinner nobody wanted. 22. Good family, quiet manners, £30,000. No, Clement, 10 years. "I am aware of the number," he said, to the day, and his sister put down her fork and did not speak again until the cheese. It was the following morning that he walked out to the Lime Avenue, because it was the one place at Quarrowe where the shutters had never been closed, and found Jemima Crale on her knees in the wet grass with the old hive stands in pieces around her and her sleeves pushed up past her elbows. "You can hold this," she said, without looking up. He held it. He was the 9th Duke of Quarrowe, and he stood in his own field holding one end of a rotten hive stand for a village woman who had not once, that he could recall, called him anything at all. "They're none of them yours any more," she said, nodding at the far row. "Those 3 are wild swarms come in since. Your own stocks died out the same year, the whole lot together, which is a thing that happens and a thing that doesn't happen, if you follow me." "I do not," she agreed. "You wouldn't." She made him wear a veil before they went near the standing hives. The veil belonged to her father and had been made for a much larger man, and it went over Clement's hat and stood out around his shoulders like a tent, and Jemima Crale stepped back, looked at him with complete seriousness, and said, "You look like a pudding under a napkin." And the Duke of Quarrowe laughed. It came up out of him without permission, a rusty, cracked, astonishing noise, and it went on longer than he could stop it, and 2 gardeners 40 yards off straightened up from the ha-ha and stared, and one of them took off his cap. Jemima Crale did not seem to think anything had happened. She had turned back to the hive. She had not been trying to be amusing. She had been describing what she saw, which was as a pudding under a napkin, and having said so she considered the matter closed. Clement stood in the wet grass under the limes with his heart going like a boy's. He was stung 20 minutes later on the wrist because he moved too fast. "That's your fault," said Jemima, taking his hand and scraping the sting out sideways with her thumbnail, brisk as a nurse. "They can't abide a man in a temper and they can't abide a man in a hurry, and you're generally one or the other. You have known me 8 days. I've known you since I was 9, she said. You came to my father's cottage for the swarm in the orchard and you gave me 6pence and you were laughing then. Everybody in Nether Quarrowe knows you, your grace. We only stopped saying so." She let go of his hand. Lady Sedgley had heard the laugh from the terrace. She said nothing about it at dinner, and she said nothing about it the next day, and on the 3rd day she said, in the tone of a woman reporting a broken window, that the honey woman was very familiar and that the household had begun to talk. "Let them," said Clement. He did not know yet what he had let out of the chimney, and he did not know what she would ask him 3 weeks later, standing at the edge of the lime avenue with a smoker going in a hand, the one question in 10 years that nobody at Quarrowe had ever thought to ask him. Who told the bees? Clement turned. The evening had gone violet behind the limes and the smoke was drifting low and blue between them. "I beg your pardon?" "When her grace died," said Jemima Crale. "Who went out and told the bees?" He stared at her. "It's the custom hereabouts," she said. "Somebody of the house has to come out and knock at each hive and say it plain, and put a scrap of black on the skep. Else they take it for a slight and they dwindle, and they go. My father did it for his own mother when I was small. He stood there and told them she was dead and he cried like a child in front of me, and I've never thought the worse of him for it." "That is a superstition," said Clement. "It is," Jemima agreed. "And your stocks all died the same winter, every one, and nobody in this house could tell me why." He found that he had to look away from her. "Nobody told them," he said. "No, nobody told anybody." His voice came out wrong. "I gave orders that the house was to be quiet. I stopped the clocks. I did not. There was no announcement made in this parish, Miss Crale. There was a notice in a London paper. I could not say it aloud. I have not said it aloud in 10 years. Jemima Crale set down her smoker. "Then say it now," she said. "They'll not repeat it." He went along the row with her in the dark, with a horn lantern, and he knocked at each hive with his knuckles, and he told them the Duchess of Quarrowe was dead. He told them her name and the hour, and that she had liked the yellow bedroom because it caught the morning, and that she had been afraid of thunder and of nothing else on earth, and that he had been in London arguing about a canal, and had come 3 days too late. He told them that he had never once said he was sorry to her face, because there had been no face left to say it to, and that he had been sorry every hour since, and that he did not know how to stop. Somewhere in the middle of it he stopped being able to speak, and knelt down in the grass with his hand on the cold straw of the skep, and Jemima Crale stood a little way off holding the lantern and did not touch him and did not say one word, and that was the greatest kindness anybody had done him in 10 years. When he could stand she gave him her handkerchief, which was enormous and smelled of smoke. That she said, "That's done then." He went to the Michaelmas Assizes at the end of the month because a duke must, and he was gone 11 days, and he thought about her on 9 of them. He came back on a Tuesday to find the lime avenue full of carts. Lady Sedgley met him in the hall with her hands folded. She had, she said, taken the liberty. The woman's manner had become impossible. There had been remarks made in Ilbury that the Duke of Quarrowe was seen daily in a field with a village beekeeper, that he had been heard to laugh, that a great house in mourning ought to have more regard for itself. She had settled the account generously. The hives were being sold on to a man at Fossbridge. "Where is she?" said Clement. "Gone home, I imagine." "Clement, do sit down." He did not sit down. He went out through the door he had come in by, and took the first horse in the yard, and rode to Nether Quarrowe with his coat unbuttoned like a man half his age. She was in her mother's garden, tying up the last of the beans, and she straightened when she heard the gate. "You needn't have come," she said. "It's no more than I expected. It is a great deal less than you are owed. I'm paid. You are not." Clement stood in the little wet garden and found that all the arrangements of his rank had abandoned him. "Miss Crale, I am 41 years old. I have been dead 10 of them, and I did not know it until a woman told me I looked like a pudding. I am not asking you to keep my bees. I am asking you to marry me, and I am asking it very badly, and I have not the smallest notion of what you will say." Jemima Crale looked at him for a long moment across a row of runner beans. "I'd want the yellow bedroom opened," she said. "Yes, and the mirrors uncovered. All of them. That cloth's a disgrace. Yes, and I'll not have her Grace put away in a cupboard either. She was here first and she was loved, and I'll not be married to a man pretending otherwise. Her picture goes back up in the long gallery where it belongs." Clement discovered that he was weeping and laughing at the same time, which he had not known a man could do. "Miss Crale," he said, "is that a yes?" "It's a list," said Jemima. "The yes is at the bottom of it." The county came to the November assembly at Ilbury chiefly to look, and Clement knew it, and took her anyway. She wore a good plain gown of dark green wool because she would not be lent silk, and her hands were what they were, and the room did what rooms do, the small silence, the turned shoulders, the whisper travelling along a wall. Miss Rowe of Ilbury was there, and Lady Sedgley, and 40 people who had spent a decade saying how sad it was about poor Quarrowe. The Duke of Quarrowe walked the length of that floor with Jemima Crale's hand on his arm, and stopped in the middle of it, where the light of the great chandelier fell hardest, and spoke without hurry and without lowering his voice. "You will have heard," he said, "that His Grace of Quarrowe has been seen laughing. It is quite true. This is the woman who did it, and she did not try to. She has kept my bees, told them what I could not tell them myself, and given me back a house full of clocks that have been stopped since some of you were children. I am going to marry her at Christmas, in my own chapel, by candles she has made. You are all invited, and I should be glad to see you, and I shall not be looking to see who comes." Then he took her in to supper before the whole room, and the whole room, having no earthly idea what else to do, applauded. They were married 3 days after Christmas. The chapel at Quarrowe was lit end to end with beeswax that burned pale and steady and smelled faintly of lime blossom, and Lady Sedgley wept in the second pew, and Jemima's mother wept in the first, and Jemima herself said her vows in a clear country voice, without one tremor in it. The clocks were started on the wedding morning. Clement went round the house with the winding key himself, room by room, 22 of them, and set every one going, and when he came to the case clock on the half-landing that had stood at 4:20 for 10 years, he stood there, some while before he moved the hands. His wife waited on the stair below him and did not hurry him, which was, he had come to understand, the whole of what she was. There is a portrait in the long gallery at Quarrowe of a young dark-haired woman in white, and beneath it always a jar of honey from the lime avenue which the Duchess of Quarrowe puts there each September, and nobody has ever asked her to explain. The mirrors are uncovered. The shutters are open in the west rooms. In summer the whole east front hums, because the swarm in the chimney was never turned out, only made welcome, and the Duke sleeps better for the sound of it. And most evenings, somewhere in that house, somebody laughs, usually him, usually at nothing much, usually because his wife has said, quite seriously, exactly what she saw.